Good day everyone. So yeah, you want to learn how to play Sukokomon? Well, this is going to be the video for you. In the background you can more or less see the builds that I'm using. Do take note that all of these builds could in some sense be better, especially Xiangling's, but that aside, you will still see the full power of this sort of team. Now Sukokomon is a very tricky and very difficult team, but of course on the upside it can do a lot of damage. So what do you need to do with Sukokomon? Well, I'm going to put the instructions on screen right now. This is how you play Sukokomon. Obviously E and Q should be very familiar, elemental skill and burst. N1 just means like your mouse 1 normal attack, N2 means like 2 normal attacks, the C stands for charge attack, and the D stands for dash. So N2 D would be 2 normal attacks and a dash. So this is kind of how you play Sukokomon, but there's a bit of a problem because even though this has got a very high skill requirement, the actual execution requirement is kind of very different from the theoretical spreadsheet, as you guys will see a bit later. And I think for the purposes of this video, it's easier for you to think of Sukokomon as a reaction-based team that's got a sort of core gameplay loop, and we will sort of demonstrate this core gameplay loop with a couple of examples. But to kick it off, let's just play by the book. So this is now what you will see I'm going to do in the background. I'm going to execute the abilities almost like 100% according to what I sort of showed you, and right off the bat you can see things are feeling a bit stiff. We're getting knocked around and so on. Remember, the requirement is precise timing. It's about playing it as exactly as you should, and yeah, it does feel kind of inflexible in a certain sense, because in order for you to get the correct timings of, you do want to avoid being knocked around, and to avoid being knocked around you would have to dash and spend a bit of time doing that, which means your exact timings would again be off. So the only way to then sort of remedy this is by then positioning in a bit of a different way. But if you even now then take time to position differently, that's going to waste time off the clock and so on. So you get the entire idea what I'm trying to say here. Trying to play 100% according to the book 100% of the time isn't always gonna work and so on. And this is what I mean by Sukokomon can feel very stiff, and that's why it's much better to think of this as a reaction based team. And if you sort of have that mindset, you can start playing a bit more fluidly around it, as long as you understand that there are certain core reactions that you've got to trigger. For instance, you've got to get your Goba swirls and so on, even though in some cases, and just sort of running a little bit of subset like taser variant that's in the team would be more than good enough. So yeah, here you can see I'm sort of more or less still following the same pattern, but I'm not executing everything exactly. I'm not doing the exact combos that you need to do with sucrose, because it's not really needed to do those combos in that exact sort of way. And as you can see, the results aren't too bad. And now we just sort of try to loop our rotation in air quotes to just match sort of Fischl's cooldowns, and now we're just going to sort of take care of the enemy, and it's going to be pretty simple. So this is much more flexible, it feels much more fluid, and it's certainly hopefully been a lot better for you guys to watch. But of course there's another problem with Sukokomon, and this is something that generally can be a problem in some meta teams and so on, and that is if you're too fast. And when you're too fast, well, you might not have enough of your elemental burst available for the next floor or for the next chamber. Now obviously this isn't a problem if you're on the last chamber, but managing your elemental burst between floors is kind of crucial. In this case you can see here that yeah, we're gonna have to take time off the clock to sort of refill up Xiangling's burst, and if we take time off the clock, well, we lose DPS, and the team on the other half will also then be under pressure to sort of take care of things. So in a certain sense, if you go too fast, you can end up in a situation like this, and this happens quite often. You'll be surprised. So what you need to do is once again be flexible with a team like Sukokomon, and sort of balance the speed at which you are playing in a certain sense and your burst management. And this sounds kind of obvious and but it's very tricky to actually sort of execute. And you see the way in which I'm sort of going to do it in the background here is by using the reaction based sort of team comp, but now I'm not going to use Xiangling's elemental burst because it's got that high cost, and I'd much rather save it for the final floor. Otherwise I can use it, but then I'd have to stop prematurely and then try and fill it up for the next floor, in which case I am either losing time on this floor, or I can then choose to lose time on the next floor. Again, it depends on the type of teams you've got on the second half and so on. So as you can see, burst management can be kind of tricky, and it will mean that you're going to have to play out of order. In fact, in my opinion, if I had to choose between Xiangling and Kokomi's elemental burst, I'd much rather have her Xiangling's burst available, and then just sort of use Kokomi's charge attacks to sort of weave in that extra bit of instance of Hydro. Once again, I would have to play a bit out of order and so on, but at least the damage loss is not going to be that severe. And then again, not having the jellyfish means you sort of, in a sense, lose out also on the taser subvariant. So it is kind of a tricky. It is definitely a very tricky team comp to get around with. But once again, if you sort of understand the fact that Sukokomon is a reaction-based team comp, and you think of it as a team that you need to manage the reactions with, and that there are many ways in which you can manage those reactions, then you'll most likely get success. Right, final floor. So ordinarily I would go behind this bishop and try and knock him towards the middle. I know it's a bit of a different strategy, but it works a lot easier for me. However, in this case, I'm actually want to try and knock him into the back of the sort of map and so on. This just makes it a bit easier to manage all of these bishops in this sort of team environment. Once again, I'm trying to be a bit more strategic. I don't want to just instantly swarm. I want to try and group up all of them, get as much of the overloaded damage onto all of the enemies, and then just sort of systematically wear them down. This is a very key thing about this floor. You've got to manage your cooldowns in a bit of a different way so that you can constantly interrupt the enemies, because nothing is worse than having these Vishaps run away from the core of your Guoba and your, what do you call it, Oz, and your core that sort of gives you your reactions. But yeah, certainly this floor can be done a lot faster, especially if you have like better artifacts on Xiangling. I'm certain that you would have been able to finish it by now, but given my artifacts and builds that you saw, I think that this sort of clearing time is somewhat decent for you, and you still have more than enough time to go and beat up the big chicken. But yeah, guys, that's been my sort of overview. Hopefully you sort of understand now how to play Sukokomon, and what I'm going to do now, you're welcome to click off the video, but now I'm just going to take you through a single run, but we're just going to use Sukokomon on the second half. So for those of you that are interested, you are welcome to stick around. Of course, because it's going to be a single take run, you'll see in the bottom right hand corner there's a little green dot, so this means there's no interruption, there's no editing in the video, there's no showing you the best side, so any mistakes I make, you will see in all of its glory and so on. Obviously, I'll just try and speedrun on the first half with my C6 characters, so yeah, you can just sort of skip forward by 30 seconds if you're not interested in it. Right, so let's begin this. So immediately animation cancel, build a bit of resolve for Raiden Shogun, and now what we're going to do is with Kujo Sora, we're just going to sort of buff Raiden, and hopefully with max resolve we'll be able to do a double crit, hit both of these enemies and take them out, just in time for Yaemiko to use her elemental burst on the final enemy. Of course, we do that little final dash there because one of our totems could not have been reset. Quick Sara E, and there we go, Yaemiko is now buffed, and we're hitting about 4650k per E. Right, that side's done. So, the Sukokomon side. So this is again one of those floors where if you play by the book, you might find that you will have almost zero like elemental burst ready for the premature Vishap. So this is one of those floors that you're going to start off strong with, but you've got to manage very carefully as to how you're going to build. So you'll see in just a moment what I mean by that. And of course, on this floor, you've got one of the enemies that can trigger a, what do you call it? So you can see I'm leaving that enemy behind so I can reposition. But this enemy here can sort of give himself electro, and it's kind of a pain to deal with that. And because we don't have any cryo units and so on, so it's best to knock as much of his health off as possible, and then rely on a bit of that Ocean clan damage to also carry us against him. But yeah, he's been sort of taken care of. So hopefully you guys can see here, playing by the book on this is just going to be so difficult. You've got to be a bit more loose with it. You've got to be a bit more flexible in how you manage cooldowns, and as you guys saw in the second half, I get still knocked around because of the fact that I'm not doing like my energy management and stamina management that properly. But yeah, here we are. We're just going to make sure we've got most of our elemental burst ready for premature Vishap, and of course here's Kokomi the tank, and that's pretty much it. So that enemy done. Let's go on to the next floor. Yeah, this is a continuous run, so unfortunately I can't skip, but it's alright. So, with Sucrose animation cancel, and we're trying to go as far away as possible. Hopefully the Mirror Maiden will try and teleport, but in this case, unlucky RNG, so we're just going to have to take it for what it is. That is, so typically the Mirror Maiden, if you're not aware, does actually teleport once you are very, very far away. So that's why I prefer going to the Sisson Mage. You can see as she sort of has a tendency to sort of come in nearer to you, but in this case it didn't just work out that nicely, so we're just going to do what we do best, and just use the Electro team, and then finally finish her off with Raiden, who can just then give energy for the rest of the team. Raiden Shogun being absolutely busted, so yeah, there is that. Sorry that this took a bit longer than it should have, but oh well. Right, so Sukokomon against the Primo Geovishap. This is probably the #1 natural enemy of this team, because you can it's almost impossible to play according to the book here, and that's because the enemy is going to continuously attack, continuously move, so you have to dash right there, otherwise you're going to get interrupted and you're not going to get your swirls off. This is what makes the Primo Geovishap actually kind of tricky for the Sukokomon team. Even though you have the damage to deal with him, Sukokomon is generally, you can see a bit of ping hitting me, of course. Sukokomon generally is not the best or the strongest alternative for single target damage. It's a fantastic sort of team for AoE, as you sort of saw in the first halves and so on, but against a single target, yeah, it is kind of tricky. So immediately now you can see all our cooldowns are not in sync, so what we're now going to have to do is sort of play this as a bit of a reaction based team. Here we just emergency swap to Kokomi. She's the tank, she heals herself up, so kind of busted as a unit right there. All of the other units would have been seriously hurt. Thank you, Kokomi. And yeah, now we're just going to sort of try and whittle its health down. Not the best, not the cleanest gameplay of Sukokomon, I absolutely admit it, but then again, you will be very hard pressed to find someone that can play almost perfectly against Primo Geovishap, and if you do, ask that person to do it 10 times in a row, and I'm certain they'll run into a couple of inconsistency issues. But yeah, this is what I wanted to demonstrate with Sukokomon. Even though it is a strong team, even though it's in quote-unquote a meta team, there are clearly some drawbacks against certain enemies and certain types, and this just shows you that for this Spyroburst, perhaps you'd be better off using, let's say, a Hu Tao or a Uemiya with a Yelan to sort of do a lot of single target against them, preferably with a shield, of course. Right, the final floor. Let's see what Team Electro is going to sort of do here. Once again, just building Resolve, moving to the back of a Primo Geovishap, like I told you guys. The reason why I typically want to move to the back is because I want to push them perhaps more towards the middle. So when it comes to the speed running and so on, it's a lot easier to sort of go back to the other little mushrooms once the enemies are pushed to the middle than it is if they're like sort of right here on the side and so on. So that's kind of my strategy, and as you can see, I'm already starting to try and run towards the enemies because it does take a couple of seconds, but yeah, it's going to be pretty easy. Raiden's just going to sort of smack him, get the crit on the one, not on the other one, miss the final one, but it's whatever. Right, so the big chicken. Let's see how Sukokomon can do against the big chicken. She's not as bad as the Primo Geovishap, so you'll see we'll be able to get a lot more of the core Sukokomon gameplay off against it. But once again, I'm just following a more flexible rotation than the strict rotation because you have the damage and so on. So yeah, that's it. The only problem here, as you can see, I absolutely got blinded, so I could not see what the chicken was doing, so we got hit with Kokomi, but it's okay. But yeah, this is a reaction-based team. You can see all the overload, vaporizers, all of them triggering, and so on. And at this point, our Sucro Fischl should have a cooldown ready, and now we can sort of start playing around that as well. So this is the thing about Sukokomon as well. Fischl is typically used as the measure for you to evaluate your cooldowns. And if you play the team correctly, you should see, like you saw now on the screen, that each one of your bursts lights up in a specific order, and provided you've got enough energy, the team can actually feel really, really smooth to play. So that's kind of what I like about it. Yeah, there's not much more that I want to add, except that, just practice those animation cancels, and if you like Sukokomon, try it, have a bit of fun, but remember, it is kind of a tricky team to play. Alright guys, if you've been watching until this time, thanks for watching, cheers.